But both of them, interestingly, talk a lot in their speeches and sermons about how humanity was finally rising above its superstitious thinking. And yet here we are today, where Pete Hegseth is getting out and asking all of us to get on bended knee and pray to Jesus for our troops. So I don't know what happened, but they were both very optimistic about the future. For those who don't know, John Deitrich was the minister in our church from 1911 and 1916. He became a humanist here and went on to become known as the Father of Religious Humanism and a signer of the Humanist Manifesto, and then, of course, had a very successful ministry speaking on religious humanism at a Unitarian church in Minneapolis. His sermons are usually quite long. In fact, one of the interesting things I think about both Ingersoll and Dietrich is they were very popular speakers. I mean, when Dietrich was here, they had to move to the theater downtown, the Bing Theater, to have 1,000 to 1,200 people attending on Sundays. But if you stop and think about the difference in that era and this era, there was no television, there were no movie houses, there were no radio. And if people wanted to go do something, hearing an interesting lecturer, especially one who said radical things, was a great thing. And I think that's what enabled both Ingersoll and Dietrich to become so popular in their time, something that is very difficult for anybody to do nowadays because there's just an abundance of speakers and mediums and opportunities. So they lived at a rare time, in a rare moment, and it's nice to be able to go back and examine some of their thoughts. So this was, again, originally given on November 30th in 1924 by John Dietrich, about somebody who inspired him, Robert Ingersoll, and as a part of a series of sermons on atheist. So yeah, more than 100 years ago. So to begin, in the words of Dietrich. Oh, but I should also say, Dietrich's sermons were very long, like this was a 16-page sermon. Mine are usually 6 pages. So just buckle up. I have amended it dramatically. Now the great thing is he had so many redundancies in his sermons as far as illustrations of his points that you can get rid of quite a lot and never lose any of his main points. So I think this will capture what Dietrich had to say about Ingersoll without the torment of staying until 2 o'clock this afternoon. Okay? All that is best in religion is unmistakingly human, while the orthodox creeds in their icy barrenness are positively inhuman. Against their harsh and really immoral doctrines, the brave and honest thinker rises in revolt. One of the greatest of all rebels against conventional religion, one of the greatest of all defenders of liberty of thought, is the subject of our discourse this morning, Robert G. Ingersoll. He was born in Dresden, New York, August 11th, 1833. His father, the Reverend John Ingersoll, was a minister, sometimes congregational, sometimes Presbyterian, and his mother, Mary Livingston, who died at the age of 36 when Robert was only 2 years old, was a woman of fine and estimable character. His father, however, was a strict disciplinarian who took life very seriously and with the best intentions made things a little solemn for his family, a factor in turning the son against the Orthodox creeds and their caricatures of deity. But according to Ingersoll's own story, it was a generous sense of justice and right that first led him to disbelief. At the age of 8 years old, he heard a minister portray in lurid terms the tortures of the rich man in vain begging Abraham for a drop of water to cool his tongue, for those who remember that story. The rich man in hell asking for a drop of water from heaven. The sensitive boy was indignant. I got up and went out, he says, knowing in my boyish heart that that was a lie. From that day to this, I have passionately hated every Orthodox creed. His father gave him a sound whipping and then prayed for him for the guidance of the erring. But neither the whipping nor the prayer convinced the boy that human frailties were deserving of eternal torture. And it was just this doctrine of eternal damnation against which the boy had rebelled that was the center of his attacks on the popular faith for as long as he lived. With the opening of the Civil War, his political point of view changed. He believed it his duty, above all else, to help preserve the Union, and since the Republican Party was also determined to keep the country together, he became a Republican and remained so until his death. In 1866, he was appointed Attorney General of Illinois and would have been candidate for governor in 1868 had it not been for his heterodox religious opinions. The delegates were all in favor of him and desired to nominate him if he would promise not to discuss religious issues on the campaign, which he refused to do. In 1877, President Hayes offered him the position of Minister of Germany, but he refused. From this time, he gave himself to the successful practice of law in Washington and later in New York. And although he gained great public reputation as an advocate, he was known to the public chiefly and became sort of a popular idol by his popular platform lectures. He never wrote a book. He was a public speaker solely and published nothing but his lectures. In 1862, he married Eva Parker, daughter of an Illinois farmer whom he adored always, and together they built an ideal home. He had become a man of literary culture. He was an ardent lover of music, in fact, of all the arts. He had a wide and sympathetic affection for his fellows and ended a happy life at Dobbs Ferry on the Hudson, July 21st, 1899. He had heart trouble and knew for 3 years before that the end might come at any moment, but never told any of his family, and thus ended the career of a clean-minded, candid, honest, brave man whose private life was tender, sweet, loving, and peaceful, and whose public career was largely the expression of his own wish, as he once said, to be out on the high seas, to take my chances in the wind and wave and star, and I'd rather go down in glory and grandeur of the storm than to rot in an Orthodox harbor. He was most popularly known as an infidel lecturer who went up and down the land attacking the Christian religion. He had a wonderful influence during the latter half of the 19th century in molding and shaping the religious opinions of men and women and freeing the human mind from the shackles of superstition. Of course, the ideas with which his name is associated and of which he was the prominent exponent were not new, but by his strenuous activity in spreading them and his appealing ability as a lecturer, they became identified with him in the popular mind. And so Ingersoll is looked upon today as the most outstanding opponent of Orthodox religion and the most ardent champion of freedom from superstition that we have ever heard of in this country, if not anywhere in the world. And this is due to the fact that he was a born orator. I believe him to be the most popular orator of his day upon earth and probably of any day. I do not know of any man living or dead who had a mightier or more powerful overall popular audience than he had. And the secret of his power is not hard to find. He was the master of expression, wonderful in his ability to mold and shape words from the utterances that he thought. Besides, he was a poet. His speeches not only wrought gems of thought, but fine-cut jewels of expression, beautiful as flowers, fragrant as lovely ideas. He had what any popular orator must have: a deep, broad sympathy with whatever is human. There is nothing that touched the interest or welfare of mankind that did not find echo in his heart and his brain. People flocked to hear him. Or I should say, he was not popular merely when he dealt with the question of religion. People flocked to hear him and were thrilled with interest, one moment shaking with laughter, another moved with tears, quite as much when he spoke for some form of movement or some literary subject or in a political campaign as when he dealt with religion. In fact, he was once offered a $100,000 a year salary to lecture on Shakespeare at a university, which he turned down. Before I discuss his religious opinions, I think he sacrificed greatly on account of his religious opinions. His infidelity was an expensive thing. Men would not employ him as a lawyer because he was an infidel. Caucuses would not nominate him, and people would not vote for him because he was an infidel. Asked what it cost him to publish his book containing the oration on the gods, he replied, "It cost me the governorship of Illinois." Everybody understood that there was hardly a position, not excluding the presidency itself, that might not have been his if he had been willing to keep still about religion. But when urged to do this, he replied, "It is much more important for me to do what I can to give men light and to break down religious superstition and bigotry than it is to be senator from Illinois or United States minister to a foreign power." And in an age of so much dodging and positioning for effect, let us appreciate the honor and honesty that dared to speak its mind and pay the price. Now, what was his religious position? The thing which he attacked above all was the orthodox belief in hell, because he thought it crushed the human heart, blotted out human happiness, made people afraid to think, turned the brain into a dungeon, and prevented human progress. And in regard to this, let me refer to what I mentioned a moment ago, his sympathy. For this I regard as the key to his character and career. Never a man lived who was more tender, more easily touched, more quickly moved. He was as responsive to all the movements of life and thought about him as the leaves of a tree to the movements of the air. This tremendous power of sympathy turned him into a flaming hatred of anything that seemed to him needless cruelty. So this one great horrible world-shadowing dogma of eternal hate was the thing that he devoted his life to fighting. The cruelty with which the church threatened men after death. What did he believe about God? He felt sure of one thing, that there is no such God as the one taught by the creeds of the Orthodox Church. He once said, "I do not know whether there is a God or not. I live in one of the rural districts of the universe, and I do not know anything about it." He never fought against the idea of God. He fought only against certain partial, unworthy, unworshipful, cruel conceptions of God. So you will find, if you read his lecture on the gods, that he was an agnostic, although he frankly confessed that he could conceive of no God that satisfied either his heart or his brain. That was his attitude. And what was his attitude in regard to the Bible? According to popular opinion, he spent a large part of his time in ridiculing the Bible. But he only ridiculed certain unfounded conceptions of the Bible, which he regarded as standing in the way of human freedom and of the progress of human thought. His idea of the Bible was that of all intelligent people today, that it is the early literature of the Jews, that it is no more sacred than the early literature of any other people, that it was not by any means the foundation of law or morality as taught by the Christians, that it was full of inhumanities, like the early literatures of most people, and to use it as an infallible guide to conduct in this enlightened age was to make it the stumbling block of the human race. His Bible, like yours and mine, contained all the worthy literature of all times and of all peoples. What was his attitude towards Jesus? It was practically the Unitarian idea of Jesus. He did not accept a theological Christ. He believed that Jesus of Nazareth was a historical character, but that the Christ of the New Testament was a myth, that it was a legend, not a life. He believed that the historical Jesus was simply the great heretic of his time who tried to bring a new truth to his generation, and for this reason suffered death, that any man who was given his life for what he believed to be truth and for freedom of thought has been one of the world's benefactors. And let me say once and for all, he said, that for the man Jesus I have infinite respect. Wherever a man has died, for man is holy ground. And to that great and serene man I gladly pay tribute of my admiration and tears. He was a reformer in his day. He was an infidel in his time. He was regarded as a blasphemer, and his life was destroyed by hypocrites who have in all ages done what they could to trample freedom and manhood out of the human mind. Had I lived at that time, I would have been his friend. And should he come again, he will not find a better friend than I will be. What did he think about the future life? I shall read only a few sentences which show his belief in this regard. And you will note that here too he is an agnostic, just as we all are when we're frank and honest with ourselves. In his remarks at the grave of a friend's child, one of the most beautiful things I've ever read, he said, "We do not know whether the grave is the end of this life or the door of another. Every cradle asks us whence, and every coffin whether. And the poor barbarian weeping over his dead can answer these questions as intelligently and as satisfactorily as the robed priest of the most authentic creed. The tearful ignorance of the one is just as consoling as the learned but unmeaning words of the other." Again he said, "I have said 1,000 times, and I say again, that we do not know whether death is a wall or a door, the beginning or end of a day, the spreading of pinions to soar or the folding forever of wings, the rise or the set of a sun, or an endless life that brings rapture and love to anyone." And again, "Is man mortal? I do not know, but one thing I do know, and that is that neither hope nor fear, belief nor denial can change the fact. It is what it is, and it will be what it must be." You will note that here again he is an agnostic, saying, "I do not know," and expressing his opinion that if there is a future life, the best way to prepare for it is to live a noble life here. And also that it is not dependent upon the acceptance of any creed or upon membership in any organization. It has been said of him that he was merely a destroyer of men's faiths, that he tore down without building up, that he took away a man's religion without giving him anything in return. That is the foolish accusation which is made against any person who teaches something different from that which is commonly accepted. Personally, I do not believe that a person is under any obligation to put something in place of that which one takes away. I do not believe that a man must keep quiet about something which he knows is untrue simply because he does not know what is true. But Mr. Ingersoll was very positive in his teaching. He taught what I persistently teach from this pulpit Sunday after Sunday, a belief in the religion of humanity, a faith in mankind, the courage to depend upon ourselves rather than upon some being in the skies. Listen to this, which was in reality his creed: to love justice, to long for the right, to love mercy, to pity the suffering, to assist the weak, to forget wrongs and remember benefits, to love the truth, to be sincere, to utter honest words, to love liberty, to wage relentless war against slavery in all its forms, to love wife and child and friend, to make a happy life, to love the beautiful in art and nature, to cultivate the mind, to be familiar with the mighty thoughts that genius has expressed, the noble deeds of all the world, to cultivate courage and cheerfulness, to make others happy, to fill life with splendor and generous acts, the warmth of loving words, to discard error, to destroy prejudice, to receive new truths with gladness, to cultivate hope, to see the calm behind the storm, the dawn before the night, to do the best that can be done and then be resigned. This is the religion of reason, the creed of science. This satisfies the brain and the heart. And it ought to satisfy the brain and heart of any normal person. That he preached his religion of humanity in which we believe, let me quote again, "Man should cease to expect any aid from the supernatural source. By this time he should be satisfied that worship has not created wealth, and that prosperity is not the child of prayer. He should know that the supernatural has not succored the oppressed, clothed the naked, fed the hungry, shielded the innocent, stayed the pestilence, or freed the slave." He tells us that he did not worship. He thought it belittling to the conception of God to suppose that he wants that kind of fulsome flattery. But if I had time, I could read you glittering sentence after sentence on this very theme of worship, expressing what he meant by it. Worshipping that which is beautiful, that which is true, that which is high and noble in life, the consecration to duty in the midst of darkness and difficulty and sorrow. If I were to try to find aspects in the life and teachings of Ingersoll, I should have great difficulty. Of course, I could not agree with him politically or economically in many respects, for while he may be classed as a radical in religion, he was very conservative economically and politically. But I do not know one word of positive teaching by him concerning the great questions of human interest that is not noble and fine and true, as healthy as the air, as fragrant and as the lilies of the field. And his life was a fine teaching itself. His relationships with his fellows were based absolutely on justice and right, and his home life was as sweet as a poem. He said, "I believe in the religion of the family, that it is far more important to build a home than to erect a church. The holiest temple beneath the stars is a home that love has built, and the holiest altar in all the world is the fireside around which the family gathers with the sweet babes." But it is said that he had no reverence. It used to be said over and over again that he was so utterly lacking in reverence even for his parents when he attacked their religion. I want to give you his idea of honoring mother and father. He said, "You never can honor your father by going around swearing to his mistakes. You can never honor your mother by saying ignorance is blessed because of ideas she had that were mistaken. I want to honor my parents by finding out more than they did. Suppose the human race had begun back in the Stone Age to honor father and mother in such a way as to consider it wicked to learn anything that they did not know. We would still be in the Stone Age. The best way to honor father and mother is to try to make a better world for their grandchildren to live in." Again, it is said that he was an infidel, but Mr. Ingersoll was indeed a man of splendid, unswerving faith. He had faith in reason. He believed in inquiry and in the search for truth. He believed that all truth is safe. He had faith in right, and it was because of that faith that he denounced wrong, even when he found it in the Bible. He had faith in justice and love, and it was because of that faith that he refused to believe in any God who could hate a part of the human race and create an eternal hell. If our churches had half as much faith in truth and right and justice as Mr. Ingersoll had, this would be a heaven as compared to what the world is today. I have sometimes been asked, what is the cause of a career like Mr. Ingersoll? What threw him into such extreme reaction? Given the teachings concerning God and man and destiny found in the old creed, given the preachers who persist in teaching these old creeds regardless of growing knowledge, and then given a man who thinks for himself, who has a heart that has been touched, who has a sense of justice and who is brave enough to speak out, and you have a man like Ingersoll, the natural necessary reaction against the old creeds. True religion cannot be ridiculed because it is not ridiculous. When we come to estimate the real service of Mr. Ingersoll, in the first place, he did more than anyone else in all the world to popularize the general attitude of the scientific mind toward religion. Ingersoll went up and down the land in every state and union, lecturing night after night to audiences of thousands. The average person learned more about advanced thought from Ingersoll's Why I Am an Agnostic than one could have derived from reading all the works of Herbert Spencer and Charles Darwin put together. In the second place, he startled his generation into thinking. Ingersoll, more than anyone else, compelled men to think whether they wanted to or not. Looking about him, he saw on every hand men holding views of the Bible which had no basis in fact and which fettered their lives. Views of God which made him a tyrant and a monster. Views of man which were in the highest degree depressing. And views of the future which were filled with horror. And he inquired, why do men in this enlightened age continue to believe such things? And he said, I will do what I can to change this. No work can be more important. I will make men think. And he did, by his eloquence, by his wit, by his ridicule, by his retorts, by his scathing denunciations, by his fiery invectives, by his jokes, by his many-sidedness and brilliancy and very extravagances of his speech. He set tens of thousands to thinking for themselves on religious subjects who had never thought for themselves on these matters before. We may well be grateful for the example of a man who had the courage to think for himself and who dared to speak what he believed true. The popularizing of scientific knowledge, making people think, brought about the third. When he began his anti-theological propaganda, there was a fiendish belief in a literal and everlasting hell. To the Orthodox people of his time, hell was a glaring, scorching, roaring reality. But a remarkable change came over even the Orthodox mind by the time Ingersoll was through. As he himself wrote just before his death, there is but little left for me to do. The fires of hell have been extinguished. The struggle with superstition is nearly over. We have passed midnight and the great balance weighs up morning. And who had wrought this glorious change? Many people, including thousands of Unitarians and Universalists and Rationalists and free thinkers. But above all these names, there stands in seven-hued radiance the name of Robert G. Ingersoll. Of him, it has truthfully been said, he sought by constant appeal the truth, reason, mental and moral integrity, physical and intellectual liberty, justice and love, and moreover, by personal example, in each of all these to make of earth a heaven. But it is his memory's richest reward that he put out the ignorant and revengeful fires of hell. So we cry today, all hail thee, great liberator of the human mind, great extinguisher of human fear, great prophet of human happiness. Thou didst live for posterity. Posterity will remember thee. Thank you.